Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
Exploring the unexplained,
breaking down barriers,
putting the macabre under the microscope,
dissecting the disturbing,
seeking out the sinister,
bringing you the jinkies and the jump scares. Hey guys, and welcome back to Freaky Friday with your hosts Devin
and Megan.
Today we're going to be talking about haunted ships
and tales from the sea.
I know that we have touched on the ocean, the mysteries of the ocean before when we spoke about the Bermuda Triangle, and this time we're just diving a little deeper.
Yeah, we're diving deep. Phantom ships and crews that disappear, ships that suddenly vanish into thin air, all the hauntings and spooky things out in the sea. Yeah, this episode is pretty much just going to be some very spooky tales for you to take home and digest.
Yeah, no, because I know when I was doing my research for this, there was just so many stories.
Yeah.
And to pick out just a handful, it was so difficult for me.
And I think a lot of people do ask the question, can the sea be haunted?
100%, come on.
Yeah, the ocean is filled with so many wrecks and bodies of doomed sailors and passengers. The Earth's orders have to be one of the most haunted places on the planet, actually.
And I mean, I think if people don't believe that it's haunted, it's only because it's very difficult to explore.
Exactly. It's only if you're on an actual ship out exploring the ocean that you're going to see stuff like that.
Yeah. But funnily enough, one of our bonding points that we haven't spoken about before, but that's a big thing for us, is the Titanic.
Yeah, from get-go. The day I knew you were going to be my good friend was the day you admitted to liking the Titanic.
Oh, okay, liking is a very, tame word for it.
I'm holding myself back here.
I think I actually told you that the Titanic was the first full-length, live-action movie that I sat through as, a 3 or 5-year-old. I was obsessed.
It's from the get-go. And I don't care about all those people who roll their eyes and say it's a cliche.
No, it's the best movie ever.
It's beautiful.
I know my mom always likes to comment that I think she was obviously the reason I sat down and watched it. She obviously rented it or whatever. And she said she was just so shocked. She thought I'd be asleep in the first 15 minutes. But I apparently sat there transfixed, was obsessed. We ended up buying it on video. And I pretended to be Rose for the next 3 years.
Well, that's the thing for me. No matter how many times I watch it, it never gets boring. And the tale of the Titanic, not even, okay, I love the Jack and Rose tale.
Yeah, the romantic side
exactly.
of it.
But the actual events of what happened has always fascinated me so much throughout my entire life.
Well, that was one thing I loved about the film, was that right in the beginning they show you footage of them going down to the wreck.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah, that's it's a completely separate thing from the story, but it's so interesting. But you actually they had a Titanic exhibition type thing here?
Oh, yes, they did, and I dived on top of that. We were very fortunate, and the exhibit visited Cape Town.
I didn't even know about this, and I'm devastated.
At the waterfront, and it was really cool. They had all the artifacts that they'd picked up off the ocean floor.
Oh my gosh.
And it was such a surreal experience, suddenly seeing the things, the story that you've had in your head and watched and thought about for years, suddenly put in front of you and brought into the same world as you. That was such a surreal moment. And that exhibit, it was literally just walking through, looking at all the different artifacts and then reading the different facts about what happened. And they did it so wonderfully. They played the music from the actual movie, different music in each room. They had light effects. In the one room, they even had a giant iceberg.
Oh my word.
Which they were keeping cold with freezers, and they drilled these holes, these finger holes. And they said, stick your fingers in there and see how long you can last, because that is the degree of the water that these people fell into.
Oh my
and
word.
After 5 seconds, I had to take my fingers out. They were done.
That is so crazy.
It was done great, and it was such an emotional experience. You connected with it on so many levels. So yeah, that was an absolute highlight in my life.
There's actually a question that I have for you that I haven't asked you in the past, because I never really looked at it as a paranormal thing or as a supernatural thing. But we often talk about how objects can hold memories and hold spirits and things like that. And I know you probably weren't concentrating on the paranormal side of things, but did you get that feeling?
I was sad throughout that entire thing, so incredibly sad, but not just for the reasons of the events that happened. It was like I was looking at these things and there was just this really sad vibe around everything there.
Wow. I would love to have experienced that, but like I said, I didn't know about it. Absolutely devastated. But I know that I'm not sure if any of the other paranormal groups did it, but I know Ghost Adventures did a whole episode at the Titanic Museum.
And that's funny because that's just the exhibit, and they had a lot of activity there. And I know at that exhibit, I think it's now in Las Vegas, as well as the actual hull resting on the ocean floor, both spike up a lot of activity. I've heard stories of ghost sightings near the rusting hull in the ocean where which is about, I think, 300 miles out to sea, where ships passing by, especially off the coast of Newfoundland, report seeing orbs just hovering above that section all the time.
I did not know that.
They've spotted it multiple times. Sure. And another one, and this one's chilling for me, is submarines that sail near the site keep picking up on a lot of radio interference and signals, or strange signals of SOS calls.
What?
That then can't be traced anywhere.
I did not know that. That is so insane.
Quite interesting is the Titanic was the first to use the SOS call signal. It used to be, I think, CQD, come quick danger.
I know that in the film, at one point the guy goes to the control room and says CQD, and he goes CQD, like what's going on, sort of thing. So I don't know about the SOS. It used to be
that they were the first to use that SOS, and I think it had just come into the system. Maybe nobody knew that, and maybe that's why nobody understood they needed help.
Oh my word, that is insane. It's so crazy. I do know though, when Ghost Adventures announced that they were investigating, they didn't say the Titanic Museum. They're like, we're investigating the Titanic, and I was like, are they gonna like get into a submarine? And
I thought the same thing. I was like, no way, are they gonna go down there?
Yeah, I was like, they're breaking new ground. The first investigation underwater.
Yeah.
Disappointed.
Would have been very cool.
No, it would have.
But yeah, there's been a lot of just different sightings linked around the Titanic. I know in 1977 there was this second officer called Leonard Bishop, I think of the SS Winter Haven area, and he gave one of his passengers, the SS Winter Haven was the ship, and he gave one of his passengers on the one trip a tour of his ship. And he said the guy was really soft-spoken, he had a British accent, and he was like unusually attentive to detail. And something struck him as odd about this man, but he just carried on with the tour and moved on with life. And years later, someone showed him a picture of Captain Edward J. Smith, which was the captain of the Titanic. And without even saying anything, this guy said, "Oh, but I know that man. I gave him a tour on my ship." And the guy laughed.
Like, yeah, right, okay.
That's impossible. That man was the captain of the Titanic.
What? That is so insane. There were so many things about the Titanic that I didn't know, and so many stories. It's so interesting.
That's just, that's not even around the exhibit. I know at the exhibit, and like I said, this is removed from the actual site of the Titanic. But as you mentioned, it may be the trigger objects within there. But there's a lady that wanders the grand staircase that employees and guests have seen. She wears this black period dress with a white collar, and her hair's in a bun. There's also this portrait on the wall of J. Bruce Ismay, if I pronounced that correctly. And he was one of the builders of the Titanic, and very not nice human being that he is. That's as nicely as I can put it.
He was portrayed so badly in the film.
He fled the sinking ship, leaving women and children on the ship to drown, and he kept his back turned to the ship while it was sinking. And it appears the ghosts don't like him very much because the staff keep coming back to find his portrait on the floor. And when the manager once watched the surveillance footage of the night before back, he watched how the portrait starts shaking violently and then is like lifted off the wall and onto the floor.
What? That is so nuts. Oh, I feel like I need to do so much more research now into the Titanic. But moving on to like some other haunted ships, I did a lot of research into the Flying Dutchman, So I feel like that's like the go-to ship when you talk about haunted ships.
I think it is one of the, if not the most famous haunted ship story out there.
I know it gets brought into a lot of like television and like
Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah. I think it was actually in an episode of Scooby-Doo.
I think so too, actually.
I feel like there was an episode of Scooby-Doo. I feel like we should know that. We should be so certain about that.
We should know every Scooby-Doo episode by heart by now.
But yeah, so I did some research into the Flying Dutchman, and it was a ship that was sailing in 1641, I believe, around the Cape of Good Hope. It was apparently heading from, I want to say, Europe to India.
I believe that's right.
Yeah. I believe it was Europe to India, and sailing through the Cape of Good Hope, which was also called the Cape of Storms because of how violent the storms were.
I think everyone living here knows that very well.
Yeah, just to reiterate for people who didn't know that. But yeah, so it was actually first given the name the Cape of Storms by Vasco da Gama when he was sailing from Europe to India. But in 1641, the captain Hendrik van der Decken.
Well done.
I tried my best. Okay, no, I've messed up. Vasco da Gama was sailing from India to Europe. Van der Decken was sailing from Holland to the Far East.
Yeah, okay. You'd probably know more than me.
My geography's terrible. But anyway. So like all trade ships, they had to sort of risk the passage around the Cape of Good Hope. And apparently they started sailing towards some really, really bad weather. And the crew were begging him to just like turn the ship around, saying, we can't do this. And he said, we will sail this ship until doomsday if we have to.
As far as I know, that everyone believes he cursed them right then and there saying that.
And apparently after he said that, an angel appeared to him.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah, so an angel apparently appeared to him and he tried to shoot at the angel.
Oh, wow.
And apparently with that, the ship's fate was sealed. And
that would make sense.
Yeah,
you don't want to shoot an angel, you know?
Yeah, so apparently the ship went down, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, from what I understand from that encounter, they did not walk away from that.
Yeah, so I think everyone on that ship perished at that time. And ever since then, it's said that, especially during storms, this sort of ghostly apparition of the ship appears. And a lot of times if it does appear during a storm, it's a sign of...
It's a bad omen.
Yeah, it's a bad omen. It's basically saying your ship's not going to make it to sea the next day. But it's been seen countless times by so many people who describe it as having almost like an eerie glow to it.
There was even a newspaper report, and I think this was back in 1942, but that's still recent enough for our times, where people in Glen Ken on the beach one day, just everyone stopped and watched this ship go, and it was mentioned in the newspapers.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't actually come across that, but I know I have heard stories from people. I think I did a ghost tour through Simonstown, and they said that people do see the ship every now and then. But I also noticed a lot of people say it glows with like a sort of glowing green or blue.
And always, like, I think you mentioned, surrounded by a bit of a tempest.
Yeah. But apparently there was one instance where I believe it was Prince George of Wales said that he saw it and it had a red glow about it.
Oh, I've never heard that one. I know there was one encounter, if I'm not mistaken, in Table Bay over here, where it came right alongside another ship to the point where the captain thought these ships are going to collide.
Oh, wow.
Like, to come that close up, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, there are so many people who've claimed to have seen it. But then again, there are a lot of people, like most paranormal things, there's always going to be skeptics who say that it's more of like an optical illusion where there'll be a boat close by and the light is sort of showing its reflection.
That sounds like a stretch to me.
Yeah, and there's the whole like scientific thing behind it about light and stuff and refractions and all that. I'm too dumb to try and comprehend that. But they say it could almost be like a mirage where it looks like this boat is floating above the water, but it's actually a reflection. I prefer the story of the ghostly ship. I think that's way more interesting.
Exactly.
And it does. It sort of brings to mind like Pirates of the Caribbean.
It definitely does, and it's nice to have a bit of a local story.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's another reason why I actually chose the Flying Dutchman. This is I wanted something close to home. I was originally actually going to go with the Queen Mary, which is also really interesting. We can maybe touch on that later if we have some time. But I know we've been talking about what you've got, and I'm so excited to hear about this.
So am I. I'm not gonna lie. When I read the story, it gave me chills, and it's a really good ghost story to take home.
Well, take us away.
I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I believe the ship was called the Orang Medan.
Sounds right.
And the way the story goes is a curious radio message was received by numerous ships that were traveling on the Straits of, I think it was somewhere around Sumatra and Malaysia. And there's conflicting dates of when this happened. Some people say it happened in 1947, others said it happened a year later in 1948. But anyway, this message went out and the origins of the message were not known. But the message was delivered in two parts, which was separated by this Morse code that nobody could actually decipher. The first part of the message went, "All officers, including the captain, are dead. Lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew dead." That's where the first message stopped. Then, as I said...
Sorry, I just got mad goosebumps. What?
As I said, then there was a whole lot of Morse code that was indecipherable. And then the second message came through, which was also the last transmission, that said, "I die."
Okay.
And that was that.
That is so scary.
So there were two ships that picked that up. They were both American. And obviously after a message like that, they were compelled to go and investigate it.
I mean, I would be sailing in the other direction.
So with the help of British and Dutch listening posts, they were sort of able to triangulate where this cryptic message came from. And the Silver Star, which is one of those American ships, which was closest to the trouble, went like full steam ahead, hoping to get there in time to aid the ship. So the Silver Star arrived at the Orang Medan, which they saw was a Dutch freighter ship. And the crew tried to signal and make contact, but there was absolutely no reply. So eventually the captain had to sort of organize a little rescue group to go and search the ship. And the rescue ship pulled up alongside it. As I said, as they were approaching it, there were no signs of life on the ship.
This is so scary. I'm sorry, I'm literally sitting here like you're telling me the most insane horror story. I'm goosebumps all over my arm.
So yeah, the search party went out and clearly something absolutely horrific happened on... Sorry, your face is quite something. Something absolutely horrific happened on the board of the SS Orang Medan, because the moment the search party boarded, it was obvious that those messages were horribly accurate. The decks of the ship were completely littered with corpses of the crew. Listen to this though. Every one of the victims, every one of those bodies were found lying down wide-eyed with like horror on their faces. Like their faces were like twisted into sheer terror, and their arms were all trying to fight off some like unseen something.
No.
It kind of brings to mind that Harry Potter Chamber of the Secrets kind of effect.
Oh, with like they were all
the
petrified. That's so scary.
Even the ship's dog was found that way. He was found mid-snarl, but also dead.
I'm sorry, the pet lover in me just hates it when the pets are brought in.
Captain was found in his bridge, dead, and the remainder of the bridge officers were found in the wheelhouse and the chart room. Exact same pose, exact same terror-stricken faces. The radio operator, who they assumed was the one who sent the distress call, was found at his station. I think his finger was still on the Morse code little button.
I don't know what that's called.
Neither do I.
Your eyes are searching mine and I have no idea.
And yeah, the engineering crew were also found in their stations with the exact same expressions.
So like no one was alive?
Not a single person. So yeah, during the search efforts, there were 3 things the rescue party noticed that were just really out of place. One of them was that the temperature, I think local temperature of the day, was in excess of about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. But when they were on that ship, they felt this ominous chill coming from somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Second was that the condition of all the victims, all had suffered, clearly, but there was not one single visible injury on the bodies. And also all the bodies were decaying at a much more rapid rate than they ever should have been.
What?
And lastly, the ship itself had absolutely no damage. It was in perfect condition.
What? Oh, I'm shook. For lack of a better word, I'm shook.
So the search party returned to their ship, and they made the decision to tow and salvage what they could from that boat. So the ships tethered up and began towing, only for a few minutes into the journey, smoke to suddenly start appearing from the bottom of the cabins, especially I think they said in the number 4 cargo hold below the deck. And some of the sailors, just thinking rapidly, immediately severed the rope and they tried to get as far away from it as possible. And within minutes, the ship exploded with such force that the entire thing lifted out the water.
What?
Before the whole thing sunk and went down to the bottom of the ocean. So they had absolutely no way of doing autopsies or finding out what the heck happened on the ship.
So it's just forever a mystery.
It is. I've got one of the witnesses' testimonies here of the state crew themselves, and they said their frozen faces upturned to sun, staring as if in fear, mouths were gaping open and the eyes staring, bodies contorted and arms outstretched.
This is completely bizarre to me. I'm sorry. I'm very interested and invested in the story.
That they took the ghastly secret of whatever happened and any chance of any autopsies or discoveries down with them to the depths of the ocean.
That's crazy.
There's been a lot of speculations about it over the years. Some people have theorized that the cargo hold was carrying something they should definitely not have been, something like potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin, which would explain why there was no record of the ship. Something very illegal. But that's also negligence to the utmost degree to take something that's so combustible on a rough ocean.
Okay, that explains the ship blowing up. It doesn't explain everyone with the horrified looks on their faces.
Other people said the ship was carrying more sinister and dangerous cargo, things like biological weapons, which were manufactured by a Japanese scientist, in specific a unit known as Unit 731, who apparently did experiments that were so horrific even Nazis would raise their eyebrows at it.
Oh wow.
But yeah, I think the whole speculation around that was that there were these dangerous chemical and biological weapons that they were being smuggled. But even so, something went horrifically wrong for that kind of result. Then there's other things that were blamed. Some people blamed wraiths.
Okay.
The fictional creatures, wraiths. Undead pirates, like the fictional Black Pearl.
Okay.
That was even blamed.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Just listening to the story, okay, the ship blowing up and stuff has a very logical explanation, but everything else to me sounds very supernatural.
Exactly. I can't think of any... I would sooner believe wraiths or undead pirates than I would anything else.
Or some kind of curse.
Exactly.
That's so bizarre.
Actual pirates were ruled out because there was no injury or blood anywhere. Some even speculated that the crew were overcome by some kind of methane gas which bubbled up from the seabed and enveloped the entire ship. But yeah, I mean, no one ever found any registry of the ship in the first place. They searched and the ship was never registered. And yeah, I think they sort of tried to take the name that it was called. And just based on that, they speculated that it was from somewhere in Sumatra, Orang Medan, which meant man of the Medan.
Okay. Damn.
But yeah, that was a story that I just had to tell.
I can't believe that I didn't know about this, because it's honestly I don't think you could have picked a better thing to talk about. Like I said, I'm completely shook. I don't have another word for it.
There are so many ghost ship stories out there that just blow your mind.
One thing I will say though, we were actually, when you gave me the name of the ship you would be speaking about, I didn't know anything about this until we spoke about it now. Just the name. And we sort of linked it up to the game Man of Medan that's out at the moment.
Which has just come out right now.
So I think it is loosely based on this story.
By the sounds of it, I would say if there's ever a horror story to base a game on, this is it.
I was about to, when you were telling me about it, I'm like, why are there no movies? But there's a game. So I think if you're interested in that story, definitely go check out the game.
Out, yeah.
Watch some. If you're not a gamer, then watch some playthroughs of it or something.
I've seen some of the playthroughs. It's really scary.
Yeah, that's the thing. I saw the first half of the playthrough, and it seemed very similar to a lot of stuff that was in your story. So Definitely check that out, guys.
And definitely go and look at the different ships and cruises and haunting tales out there on the ocean. There's so many. The Mary Celeste, Queen Mary, the SS Valencia, just there are tons, and I really do recommend you going and adding to your little collection.
Your collection of haunted ship stories. I was going to talk about the Queen Mary if we had a bit more time, so that's one I'd recommend you go check out, because there are a lot of really creepy stories around that, and I believe they're actually open for ghost tours.
Oh really?
Now, yeah. I think you can actually spend the night.
I opt no.
I choose life. But thanks for joining us, guys, and we're going to come at you with some really interesting stuff next week, so make sure you tune in, and also make sure that you check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram under the handle Blended Podcasts. Freaky Fridays, hosted by Devin Beatty
and Megan Portnoy, and produced with the generous assistance of Janu Blau.
And Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.